Hello YouTube. Let's speak about the moon today. The moon is the only natural satellite of the Earth and the fifth largest moon in the solar system. It is the largest satellite of the planet in our solar system relative to the size of its primary planet. But the question has remained, and that's what we'll speak about, is it natural? Is the moon natural? Look, this celestial body has long been surrounded by a kind of mystical halo that has held us captive since time immemorial, a mysterious glowing sphere hanging in the sky for thousands of years. It has given rise to many legends in various cultures. Throughout the history of mankind, strange fairy tales have been written about the moon and amazing stories have been told. And they did not come from nothing. There's one very curious mystery that has been haunting those who are looking for all sorts of mystical phenomena on the moon for a long time. These are the mysterious lights that periodically appear on the surface of our satellite, transient lunar phenomena. And we don't have the answer to this riddle yet. Strange lights on the moon are regularly observed today. There are hundreds of documented reports of similar events. They are made up of both professional astronomers and simple amateurs from all over the world. The observation of such a phenomenon was also reported by the astronauts of the Apollo 11 mission a day before their historic landing on the moon. Going by the Russian sources, I have this, that the astronomer Michael Collins described it in the following fashion. We observed an area of the moon's surface that was significantly brighter illuminated than the surrounding area, and it even seemed to fluoresce. It was easy to see the bottom of the craters, and the area around them was also quite bright. During the following missions, unusual phenomena was also noted. In 1972, the astronauts of the Apollo 17 mission observed a strange sight several times. Lunar module pilot Harrison Schmitt recorded a very bright flash of light north of the Grimaldi crater while in lunar orbit. And the next day, astronaut Ronald Evans also noticed a bright flash in the vicinity of the Eastern Sea. In general, NASA astronauts had a chance to see a lot of interesting things on the moon. I'm not sure if we know about all of them, but that's how it is. Just as the Chinese astronauts or cosmonauts or taikonauts have a chance to see them today. Maybe more than the Americans have seen. Anyway, what is the nature of all these strange phenomena on the moon? In fact, despite the fact that they have been observed for centuries, no one really knows what exactly causes these mysterious lights on the moon. And today we don't know much about them. We don't know more than we knew centuries ago. Even though this phenomenon are observed several times a week, nevertheless there are hypotheses, of course. One of them explains the lights on the moon by emissions of gases from the subsurface cavities. This process is called degassing. It is also possible that the light anomalies occur as a result of volcanic activity, meteorite impacts, the work of electrostatic charges, exposure to solar wind, light radiation caused by the destruction of rocks, moon shakes or other seismic phenomena, or a combination of all of the above. And of course, there is a hypothesis about the activities of alien civilizations on the moon. The moon keeps flashing multicolored lights at us and shine brightly at night. So, are we dealing with some kind of natural phenomenon, or are they really aliens? Or both at the same time? We know no more about this than we did hundreds of years ago. Obviously, this phenomenon is still one of the many mysteries of the moon. The total solar eclipse is seen only by us. The Earth, the Moon, and the Sun are located at such a distance from each other that from time to time the Moon completely covers the Sun. If the Moon were closer or further away, we would not have seen such beauty. It's hard to get rid of the idea that all this resembles an artificial structure. But who created it and why? Who needs eclipses to happen regularly on Earth? Where does this accuracy come from? The orbits of the Earth, Moon, and Sun are filigreed, as if by some kind of space engineer. If our planet had moved a little further or closer to the Sun, we would never have seen such beautiful celestial phenomena. The origin of the Moon has been haunting scientists for a long time. What is this strange satellite? Back in the 1960s, Soviet researchers Mikhail Vasin and Alexander Sherbakov hypothesized that the Moon is too big for a planetary satellite. Its size is about a third of the size of the Earth. Satellites of other planets are much smaller than their hosts. Also, the Moon is not a dead object. During the period of long-term observations, several hundred different phenomena occurring on the Moon were recorded. Flashes, flickering, the flight of light points. The analysis of the soil extracted on the Moon showed that it seemed to be magnetized, although it does not have its own magnetic field. And the most interesting thing turned out that the Moon is older, not only than the Earth, but also older than the Sun itself. There is a hypothesis that it has been shining in our skies not so long ago, not for such a long time. In the Vedas, ancient manuscripts, there is a sun god, but the Moon is not mentioned anywhere. And this is strange because people cannot look at the sky and not notice the shining sphere. But we can assume that it was made somewhere and delivered here by someone. We can assume that. We can assume anything. Anyway, in some ancient writings and cultures, one can find references to times when the Moon did not exist in the sky. In ancient Greece, Democritus and Anaxagoras mention that there was a time when there was no moon in the sky, in the night sky. Describing the history of the Greek region of Arcadia, Aristotle writes that the Pelasgians, people of the sea in Greek, have lived in this area since very ancient times, at a time when the moon did not exist. Apollonius of Rhodes mentions something similar, speaking of a time when not all celestial objects occupied their places in the sky, before the era of the generation of Deucalion and Pyrrha, when there was no moon and there were only Pelasgians who lived in the mountains of Arcadia, region in Greece. These inhabitants of Arcadia were also known as the settlers, which in Greek actually means those who were before the moon. Well, Anaxagoras, who lived in the 5th century BC, was one of the first philosophers in the history of mankind who recognized that the moon was a rocky celestial body and not a deity. In Plutarch's work Moralia, we find the following statement. There were followers of the Arcadians of Evander, the so-called pre-lunar people. In the same way Ovidius wrote, they say that the Arcadians owned their land before the birth of Zeus, and the people are older than the moon. And Stephen of Byzantium echoes him. The Arcadians and their women existed before the moon. Hippolytus refers to a legend that says that Arcadia gave birth to Pelasgus, older than the moon. Lucian of Samosata, in his work on astrology, also mentions that the Arcadians in their madness claim that they are older than the moon. Well, let's leave Arcadia and go to South America. Strange evidence of the absence of the moon in the heavens has also been found in other parts of the world. For example, oral traditions of the indigenous Colombians of the highlands of Bogota in the eastern mountain ranges of Colombia belong to the period before the moon. In the most distant times, when the moon was not yet in heaven, the legends of the Chibcha tribe say. Further to the south of the American continent, in Tiahuanaco, the symbols of the gates of on the gates of the sun, Puerta del Sol, and the walls of the Kalasai indicate that the moon appeared in orbit around the earth at a certain point about 12,000 years ago. I told you, remember that period in history. In one of my recent videos about the Ural archaeological discovery of the idol, it dates back to more or less close to that period of time, and there are other strange things that happen around that time on the planet, on the face of our planet, and I'll get back to it in my future video. But anyway, now we know that according to these symbols from South America, the moon appeared in orbit around the Earth about 12,000 years ago. This conclusion was reached in 1956 by researcher and writer Hans Schindler Bellamy, who studied the monument. He wrote about this in his book, the Tiahuanaco Calendar. Bellamy interpreted ancient astronomical symbols as a storytelling about the moon. He explains the symbols on the stone carry mathematical and astronomical information. They not only indicate when the moon appeared, but also claim that before it entered orbit, the Earth rotated slower and the year lasted only 290 days. It is believed that because of this time difference, the planet rotated around its axis at a slower speed than today, and therefore the days were longer. According to the aforementioned author, the symbols on the gates of the sun indicate that these characteristics of the Earth change with the appearance of the moon, which caused great upheaval due to the changed gravity. The number of storms, earthquakes, floods, and other disasters has increased. It is believed that this event may have been the source from which the story of the flood in Noah's Ark appeared, as well as other legends present in various cultures around the world. Let's go to Africa. The Zulu people believe that the moon is hollow. According to Zulu legend, the moon was brought here hundreds of generations ago by two brothers, Wovane and Mpanku. They are also known as the Water Brothers because they had scaly skin like fish. This story is similar, by the way, to the Mesopotamian Sumerian accounts about the two brothers Enlil and Enki. Zulu legends tells of Wovane and Mpanku stealing the moon in the form of the egg from the great fire dragon and emptying out the yolk until it was hollow. They then rolled the moon across the sky to the Earth and caused cataclysmic events on this planet. Look, this is also reminding me of the Chinese legends, and I was in the land of the Zulus many years ago, and I hope to go back one day to do my own research about this and some other aspects that I'm interested in South Africa, including ancient cities. But anyway, Zulu legend says that the Earth was very different before the moon arrived. There were no seasons, and the planet was permanently surrounded by a canopy of water vapor. People did not feel the fierce glare of the sun that we do now, and they could only view it through a watery mist. Look, the ancient memory of the Earth inhabited by pre-lunar people was passed down from generation to generation, forming the traditions of many ancient civilizations. I recall something similar from the Siberian tribes and writings. I need to look up this information. I have it, but it's very interesting that existence of our world before the moon appeared in the sky. Anyway, are these just myths, or is there more to them? And the questions are more than interesting if we consider the second option. How did the moon end up in the Earth's orbit? Is it part of the Earth, or did it appear as a result of the impact of another celestial body, as scientific theories claim? Is its existence completely natural in its current position, or was it formed somewhere else and put into orbit and perhaps partially created by an extraterrestrial civilization? 50 years ago, again, I'll repeat, Sherbakov and Vasin came to a very interesting conclusion. The moon is an artificial space object. The creation of alien engineering. Think about it. Lunar craters have almost the same depth, which means that the meteorites that fell on the surface encountered some kind of obstacle. most likely a metal shell. There's a lot of titanium in the lunar surface, from which submarine hulls are made on Earth. This suggests that the moon has a very hard shell. And when the density of the moon was determined, it turned out that this is a very small, much smaller than that of the Earth. And again, one can come to the conclusion that it is empty inside. The fact that huge masses of metal are hiding in the bowels of our satellite was confirmed by the experiments of the lunar American Apollo missions. All this allowed scientists to think that our satellite is an abandoned spaceship or an abandoned transshipment station of alien civilizations. Let me underscore, some scientists are brave enough to think so, not most. Anyway, it is possible that the moon is of natural origin, but has been adopted by other civilizations for their bases. According to another hypothesis, the moon is a fragment of the planet Theia, which collided with the young Earth more than 5 billion years ago, and now its part revolves around our common home. And what if we assume that someone carefully adopted this fragment for their own purposes? According to scientists, the sun attracts the moon twice as much as the Earth, and our satellite should have flown to the star long ago, or at least somehow changed its course of its orbit of movement. But the moon does not seem to react at all to the attraction of the sun, and does not move from its place. This is another mystery. Some years ago, a scientist from the Institute of the Study of the Solar System analyzed 370 stars similar to our sun. They found out that our star has just the perfect character, while the rest of the stars are constantly exploding and outraged, splashing out plasma and burning their planets. The sun only occasionally reminds itself of solar storms and practically doesn't change its brightness. It seems that someone is adjusting its light by screwing the brightness of the light in time. But whose skillful hand twists its flame so that it burns calmly and evenly? Could it be that the sun has an important mission to shine evenly in the dark, preserving life on our planet? And what if the moon is a beacon that someone marked our planet with, gave the right shape, size, and helped get it into the right orbit? And the only purpose of the moon is to regularly block the Earth from the light of a star named the Sun? The moon is an alien space object created to support life on Earth. That's what some people believe. The uniqueness of the moon is such that it is impossible to explain its appearance by natural causes. Moreover, it was thanks to the appearance of the moon that life, including intelligent life, was born on Earth. An accident? Surprisingly, there are people who think so, but such coincidences simply do not happen. This is a reasonable plan that someone has implemented. In our galaxy, only our moon has those unique parameters: its position, its orbit, size, etc. Well, some people believe it. I don't think we should say galaxy. I think maybe solar system, but I have to tell you what other researchers in Russia, for example, believe. It plays a crucial role for life on Earth. Without the presence of the moon, the tilt of the Earth axis would be completely different, which means that there would be no seasons on Earth, and life, if it were possible, would be incredibly complex. The moon performs an incredible function. It supports life on Earth. We wouldn't be here without it. Okay, so that was the second hypothesis. The origin of the moon is one of the most difficult problems of cosmogony. So far, three hypotheses have been discussed. Hypothesis 1: the moon was once part of the Earth and broke away from it. Now this hypothesis has been refuted by the evidence. Hypothesis 2: the moon formed independently from the same cloud of dust and gas as the Earth and immediately became a natural satellite of the Earth. But then why is there such a big difference in the specific gravity between the moon 3.33 grams per cubic centimeters, and Earth 5.5 grams. In addition, according to the latest moon rock, it has the same composition as the Earth, and what's more, it is older than the Earth, at least 8 million years. Hypothesis 3. The moon arose separately and moreover far from the Earth, perhaps even outside the solar system. This means that the moon did not need to be molded from the same clay as our planet. Floating through the universe, the moon appeared near the Earth, and by the complex interaction of the forces of gravity, it was put into a geocentric orbit, very close to the circular. But such a catch is almost impossible. In fact, scientists studying the origins of the universe today do not have an acceptable theory explaining how the Earth-Moon system originated. So was Moon an artificial artificial satellite of the Earth, put into orbit around it by intelligent beings unknown to us? We do not yet know who exactly conducted this unique experiment, which only a highly developed civilization is capable of, from what we know. So was it a cosmic Noah's Ark? If you are going to launch an artificial satellite, I think it's desirable that it would be hollow. At the same time, it would be naive to believe that someone capable of carrying out such a grandiose space project would be satisfied with just some giant empty object launched along the near-Earth trajectory. It is more likely that we're looking at a very ancient spacecraft, inside of which there was fuel for engines, materials, and accessories for repair work, navigation, instruments, observation equipment, and all kinds of mechanisms. Or maybe all this did not happen, but there are now numerous UFOs that we observe on Earth, and they come from one place, from the moon. That's what some people believe too. In other words, everything necessary for this cosmic ark to be able to serve as a kind of Noah's Ark of intelligence and be a real one who seeds life, and maybe even a home for the entire civilization, assuming a long, thousands of millions of years existence, and long journeys through space, thousands of millions of kilometers. Naturally, the hull of such a ship must be super strong, and on the moon it is made of the titanium to withstand meteorite impacts and sharp changes between extreme heat and extreme cold. Probably the hull will be two-layered. The base is a dense armor with a thickness of about 32 kilometers, and the outside is a looser coating, a thinner layer of about 3 miles on average. In some areas where the lunar seas and craters are located, the upper layer is quite thin. In some cases, it doesn't exist at all. Since the diameter of the moon is 2,162 miles, then if viewed from our point of view, it is a thin-walled sphere, and of course not empty. All kinds of materials and equipment can be located on its inner surface, but the largest part of the lunar mass is concentrated in the central part of the sphere, in its core, whose diameter is 2,062 miles, right? Thus, the distance between the kernel and the shell of this knot is in the region of 30 miles. This space was undoubtedly filled with gases necessary for breathing, as well as technological and other purposes. With such an internal structure, the moon could have an average specific gravity of 3.3 grams per cubic centimeters, which is significantly different from the Earth, 5.5 grams per the cubic centimeter. The most numerous and interesting of the formations on the lunar surface are craters. They differ significantly in diameter. Some of them are less than a yard across, others are more than 120 miles. The largest has a diameter of 148 miles. How did such potholes appear on the moon? There are two hypotheses, volcanic and meteoritic. Most scientists prefer the latter. Kirill Stanikovich, a Soviet physicist, Since 1937, he had written a whole series of papers in which he expounded the idea that craters are the results of the bombardment of the moon for millions of years. And he really means bombing, because even the smallest celestial body caught in one of the fastest frontal collisions, so common in space, behaves like a warhead loaded with dynamite, and sometimes even an atomic warhead. Upon impact, there is the instantaneous combustion, transformation into a dense cloud of incandescent gas, into plasma, and a very definite explosion occurs. According to Professor Stanukovich, a rocket of considerable size, let's say 6 miles in diameter, when colliding with the moon, should penetrate to a depth of 4 to 5 times of its own diameter. So what, 24 to 30 miles? The amazing thing is that no matter how big the meteorites that fell on the moon were, some of them more than 60 miles in diameter, and no matter how fast they moved, in some cases the total speed reached 38 miles per second, the craters they left behind, for some strange reason, are all about the same depth, 1.2 to 2 miles, although they vary greatly in diameter. Take the crater 148 miles in diameter. In terms of area, it surpasses Hiroshima by hundreds of times. How powerful the explosion must have been for millions of tons of lunar rock to gush out like a fountain for tens of kilometers. At first glance, no one would expect to find a very deep crater here, but nothing like that. There are no more than 3 miles between the upper and lower levels, and a third of this distance falls on the rock wall raised around the crater like a jagged crown. It's too small for such a large hole. In addition, the crater floor is convex, repeating the curve of the lunar surface. If you were standing in the center of the crater, you would not even be able to see the floating edge. It would be over the horizon, a depression that looks more like a hill, or rather is rather a strange phenomenon. Not really assuming that when a meteorite hits the outer coating of the moon, it plays the role of a buffer, and the foreign body is in front of an impenetrable spherical barrier, only slightly denting a 20-mile layer of armor. The explosion scatters pieces of coating far and for a long time. Considering that the thickness of the moon's protective coating is estimated to be 2.5 miles, it can be assumed that this is approximately the maximum depth of the craters. Now let's consider the chemical features of the lunar rock. During the analysis, American scientists found chromium, titanium, and zirconium in it. All these metals have refractory, mechanically strong, and anti-corrosive properties. The combination of all these metals would have an enviable heat resistance and the ability to resist means of aggression, and could be used on Earth for lining electrical furnaces. If it were necessary to develop a material to protect a giant artificial satellite of the Earth from the adverse effects of temperature, cosmic radiation, and meteorite bombardment, experts would have probably stopped these metals. In this case, it is unclear why the lunar rock is such an unusually poor conductor of heat. Isn't this what the designers of the Earth's super satellite were trying to achieve? From the point of view of engineers, this spaceship of bygone centuries, which we call the moon, is built superbly. Perhaps there is a good reason for its durability. It is even possible that it existed before our planet. In any case, some pieces of lunar rock turned out to be older than the oldest on Earth. Of course, it is difficult to say when it began to shine in the sky above the Earth, but based on some preliminary estimates, we can venture to assume that it was about 2,000 million years ago. But now we know there are civilizations on our planet that say that the moon is a recent development, that there was time when we had no moon in the sky. Well, it is likely that the moon is still inhabited, and probably many of its automatic devices continue to work. The position stabilizers are functioning, and it continues to fully fulfill its original task, the maintenance of life on Earth. And although the moon is always turned to us with the same side, it has been standing unsteadily on its axis for some time, and from time to time showing us parts of its reverse sides that were previously invisible to observers on Earth, until the Chinese came to the moon. I don't know if landed is the right word. Anyway, perhaps this suggests that time takes its toll. Both the body and the positioning systems have collapsed to one degree or another. Some seams on the inner shell have obviously parted. It can be assumed that the long, up to 940 miles, chains of small craters that were previously attributed to a volcanic activity were caused by gas eruptions through the cracks that appeared in the armor plating as a result of the accidents. Undoubtedly, one of the most magnificent features of the lunar landscape, a straight wall with a height of almost 500 yards and a length of more than 60 miles, was formed as a result of the fact that one of the armor plates bent under the blows of celestial torpedoes and raised one of its straight, smooth edges. Presumably, the population of the moon was taking the necessary steps to eliminate the consequences of the meteorite bombardment, for example, patching holes in the outer shield covering the inner shell. For these purposes, probably a substance from the lunar core was used, from which a kind of cement was made. After processing, this substance was piped to the surface where it was required. Not so long ago, astronomers discovered variations in gravitational fields near large seas. We believe that the reason is as follows. The dry seas of the moon are actually areas from which the protective coating of the armor plating was torn off. In order to repair the damage in these vast areas, the plant producing the repair substance had to be brought directly under the side, so it could fill with its cement. The resulting flat areas look like seas to an Earth observer. The supplies of the materials and equipment for this are undoubtedly still where they were, and they are massive enough to cause this gravitational analysis. Okay? So what is the moon today, according to researchers who promulgate this hypothesis that I just told you about? Well, is it a colossal necropolis, a city of the dead, where some form of life have died out? Maybe it's like a space flying Dutchman, a ship abandoned by its crew and controlled automatically. The ship is so old that it should have fallen apart a long time ago, but someone is repairing it, which means its team is still at their posts. Who are they, living beings or robots, whose task is to maintain the work of the moon and control what it provides, life on Earth? In this case, the one who controls the moon controls life on Earth. Are they our creators, they ask? Or we are the ancestors of the crew of the cosmic ark, which in the past has found this planet and brought it to life by creating their Eden? All this many UFOs may be the staff of the station Lunar, or are we hybrids made for life on Earth as our creators continue to run the moon and the development of our civilization with the help of UFOs, they ask? There are a lot of questions, but there are no answers to them yet, not at least because the authorities of a number of countries and the world science controlled by them are trying to ignore the strangeness of the moon. What do they want to hide from us, and what do they know about what is really going on that makes them lie to the people? That's what the proponents of the hypothesis say, and I can only answer to them, keep an eye on China, because if anybody is going to develop the moon in the near future, it's them. Russia talks about it, United States keep pushing dates. The Chinese will do their work. I have no doubts. It is what it is. Now let's look what happened to the moon in the year of 1178. Well, we already know that the moon is, without a doubt, one of the most mysterious objects in our sky. And thousands of years ago, ancient civilizations looked at the moon with awe, considering it some kind of divine phenomenon. Look, all sorts of strange things associated with the moon. Well, there's a question of who blew up the moon. It happened in June of 1178. A group of monks from Canterbury, southeast England, watched as the moon suddenly exploded and turned into sparks, taking on the blackish appearance. Agree, it sounds bizarre and strange. The description of this event looks like this. On the Sunday before the feast of St. John the Baptist, after sunset, when we saw its light for the first time after the new moon, 5 or more men sitting face to face observed a miraculous sign. Now there was a clear new moon, and as usually happens in this phase, its horns stretched to the east, and friend, suddenly the upper horn split in two. A burning torch burst out of the middle of it, throwing flames, coals, and sparks far away. The body of the moon, which was lower, curved, and according to those who say they saw it with their own eyes, the moon trembled like a snake that was struck. After that, everything returned to its original state. So what did the monks observe in the year 1178? Did the moon really explode? According to some modern researchers, in fact, people did not witness the explosion of the moon. They just observed a powerful impact of some large body that crashed into the surface of our only satellite at that time. As a result of this collision, a crater was formed, which we know today as the Giordano Bruno crater. In the right place at the right time, however, there are people who disagree with this hypothesis. They believe that a blow of such force would send lots of debris towards the Earth, which would lead to the presence of a much larger number of witnesses to this strange phenomenon. Indeed, studies have shown that within a week after such an impact, at least 10 million tons of ejected lunar rock should enter the Earth's atmosphere. According to a report released on this occasion by NASA, such a collision would cause a week-long meteor storm on Earth, but nevertheless, there is no mention of such a storm in any known historical sources, including European, Chinese, Arabic, Japanese, and Korean astronomical archives. So what was it then? A collective hallucination or a conscious fake? One can only guess, but according to many researchers, in principle, this phenomenon can be explained. Most likely the monks saw an explosion in the atmosphere of a powerful meteor. In the place where the monks were, and only from there, this event looked like if someone has blown up the moon, while people in other places have observed such a phenomenon as a bright shooting star. The monks from Canterbury most likely just happened to be in the right place at the right time, and they saw a meteor that exploded right against the background of the moon. This explains why only 5 people saw the phenomenon. Or maybe, in fact, it was an alien thermonuclear reactor that exploded. Listen to this. Moon rocks brought back to Earth have been dated at approximately 5.3 billion years old, and the dust that they were resting on has been dated at approximately 6.3 billion years old. This means that the moon cannot have come from broken off from the Earth, which is only 4.54 billion years old. Just think about it, and please understand, I will bring you more information from a very distinguished and very well-versed Ukrainian scientist Arkhipov, who studied the moon all his life, and the incredible findings that he has. But it has to be on another video, of course, at another time. There's so much more to tell you about the moon. Please support my research through the links in the description to this video. Please subscribe to my channel and tell others. Thank you for your attention.